See what she does to me? She gives me the colonial slide. I knew it was coming. So the reality is, in our minds, there are three major issues, and there are probably a whole lot more. We just really want to focus on these three issues. So what happened with colonialism is that the colonialists brought a new monetary system, a new way of trading, which was foreign. The other influence, major influence, was the sort of land grabs that happened. So, as we've spoken about earlier, a lot of the tribal lands were dispossessed by white farmers, and it kind of culminated in the 1913 Native Land Act, whereby black people were only allowed to own about 13% of the available land in South Africa. So those were three major influences, and I know there are many, many others, but if you just think about those three and the way traditional financial planning was done in these black communities, those all had a massive influence. But there were a couple of others. This slide, don't worry too much about the detail. What we're talking about here is how people migrated from the rural areas to the cities. And this is something that started many, many years ago. And one of the main contributors was that the work that was available in the cities. But because of apartheid, the families couldn't necessarily move to those cities. So you all grew up experiencing this. You've heard the stories from a mother, a father, or one of the like, where mom had to go and work in a city because she was given permission under the apartheid laws to work and live in a city. Dad worked on a mine. Okay, that was a very typical African story, which kind of changed when apartheid was ended. Because what happened then was that it was a lot easier to move. But the problem is the damage kind of had been done to the family structures. So you guys, I'm like preaching to the converted. You lived it, you've seen it, you've experienced it. But I'm just highlighting that this rural-urban migration meant there was a change in the way that planning was done traditionally in these black cultures. The second or the third big influence was the AIDS pandemic. And we saw this reach its peak in the sort of early 2000s. And what this did, and I'm sure a number of you again in this room have lived through this. You've lost your mother and your father back then. You were the eldest child in the family, and you were expected to raise your siblings. If you were fortunate, you had grandparents who were still around, but they might not have had the financial means. So these are had major implications for the way that black people traditionally planned. So we now need to ask ourselves the question, and it's a difficult one because there are a lot of my colleagues in this room, and as a profession, the question is, what have we done to understand this very different background when it comes to putting these financial plans together? The view is we believe that, and I'm including myself, I'm including our business, we believe we've been failing up to now, if I have to be brutally honest. We believe we've been failing. So why do I say this? Well, let's look at how we do financial planning. Let's look at what the textbook tells us are the life stages. And I'm not going to go through each and every one. I know I'll put you to sleep. But I just want to focus on a couple of issues. Let me call us white guys, Western sort of way of planning. There's a big focus on 21sts. There's a big focus on the wedding. And our biggest concern, if I'm sitting here in this room, the only thing I'm really concerned about is when are my parents going to run out of money? Because, they call us the sandwich generation. We want to make sure we've raised our kids before our parents need our support. And that's really the only major concern we have. And our planning is actually quite simple. It's very simple and straightforward. And I'm going to hand in to Sherry, and you'll see from the chart, there's a whole lot more that comes into a black person's financial planning.
Yes, thank you, Craig.
Thanks.
So what like Craig said, what we're trying to do with this slide is to show you the differences between what currently the financial planning framework is all about. So someone gets born, we save for education, they get married, maybe a divorce, and then retirement and death. But what we're saying today is that a black African person's life is not as straightforward as that. And this is what I'm going to show you today. So you get born, right? And before you go to varsity, before you start saving for education, you have to go through certain rites of passage. If you're a Xhosa person, who here is Xhosa? Ever heard of Umgidi? That must happen, right? It's a rite of passage where young boys turn into men. But in our financial planning concept, in the conversations that we have with clients, these topics are missing. We don't account for that. You go to varsity, you get education, you get some education. I won't call it black tax. I'll just say do something at home. You have to show appreciation to your parents. You have to, maybe renovate your mother's kitchen just to show that, you have been educated and you're grateful. And marriage is not just marriage. It's not a one sentence, one wedding, we go to court, we sign papers, it's done. I've lived through it. There's lobola, right? Aurora if you're Shona. And before you get to the traditional wedding part, as a lady, you have to be welcomed into the groom's family. We call it kuperekwa. If you're Zulu or Xhosa, it's called umembeso. You have to go to the groom's family, and it's another big event. It's a big welcoming event. It's another big financial event because you must buy certain things to take to the groom's family. And then there's the traditional wedding, and then there's the white wedding, right? And there are all these other steps, and we get to death. Death is not just you die, cremation happens. In planning, we put like 20,000, 30,000 rand death expense. But what we're saying is that in the African culture, it's more than that. You die, and there's a huge gathering that happens. There's a memorial service that happens. And a few months down the line, there has to be a tombstone unveiling that happens. Depending on which part of Africa you're from, there are certain other events that follow that death event. And this is what we're saying, to say the current financial planning model is not inclusive or is not including all these other steps. It's really just catering to a certain minority and a certain group of people. So this is essentially the grips of what we're saying, to say we have to do better as financial planners. Yeah.
So it's back to me. Okay,
yes.
Sherry, you can keep the...
Cool.
Yeah. So I think the question is, so what now? And the good news is we don't need to go designing new software and new tools and come up with like massive solutions. The solution's actually simple. It's staring at us. We need to understand black culture. As financial planners, we need to understand black culture and we need to plan for it. All the tools are there, as I've said. It's a very simple process. We need to be trained. We need to educate planners to ask the right questions. And I don't think that is happening. Certainly hasn't been happening in our business up to now. Take full responsibility for that. But this is a massive area in our view that we can improve the process so it becomes a lot more inclusive.
Thank you, Craig. And just on that previous slide, we almost thought perhaps we should include exactly how much each step costs. And then we thought about it. Financial planning is not about the amount. It's the why. It's the story. And we need to cater for we need to speak to that. Our financial plans need to speak to people's full stories and not just part of what we think as planners is important. But we need to have plans that reflect people's cultures and that are just culturally resonant and effective for them. And just in conclusion, we underestimate the power of financial planning. And I think having a financial planner can be a powerful thing. And I think if we put some measures in place to sort of address the things that we've raised today, financial planning actually has the potential and the power to promote acceptance within our very diverse society. Financial planning also has the power to promote cultural preservation in a world where black people here will understand. We feel like, oh, the new generation is doing things differently. But imagine having a plan that speaks to your cultural values, your child going through your plan one day and knowing exactly why you want them to go through umembeso, why you want them to go through certain cultural processes, and this is reflected in your financial plan. I think we have a powerful industry, and we can do so much more than we're currently doing, just to involve and to include everyone in what we do as financial planners. Thank you.
Thank you.